Hello again. Welcome to chapter 13. This chapter is on early adulthood, the physical and cognitive development of people between the ages of 18 years old and 25 years old. So let's go ahead and begin with initiation into adulthood. So we know that it's common in many cultures to have a ceremony for entry into adulthood. For example, in the Igbo tribe, in the Tanzanian village, they have an entire ritual that ends in a 2-day ceremony where boys are circumcised in front of everyone in the village. During this whole ritual, the boys are separated from their mothers for 3 months. They're trained to hunt. They learn how to inseminate their future wives. They're taught how to tend to gardens, all things that culture considers the activities of a man. They receive new names to symbolize that their childhood selves are gone at the end of this ritual. So, if you look at our culture, you might ask yourself, what activities do we have that signal transition into adulthood, similar to the Igbo? Maybe it's getting a driver's license, maybe it's a bar mitzvah, maybe it's getting married, learning how to shave, voting. We don't really have a set cultural tradition that most people can point to unanimously as our transition into adulthood. But one of the things that we see occur commonly in colleges is hazing, which is the practice of initiating individuals into group membership through arduous and demeaning tasks. It's also considered a rite of passage by early adults. And, believe it or not, people tend to want this experience because they volunteer to go through it. For example, when they join sororities or fraternities, they have to pledge and they know that there will be a certain amount of hazing going on. So the question that researchers are interested in is why? Why do people want to be victims of this hazing? So before we continue that conversation, let's go ahead and watch a quick clip from the movie Dazed and Confused on some girls being hazed.
Excuse me, thank you. All right, you little freshman bitches! Eric! That was pathetic! Let's try it again! That means get up, you lazy little bitches! Get up!
Get up! You heard her!
Eric! That was horrible, you little slut girls, you little freshman sluts! Get up! Get up! 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 Eric!
Now, see, what's fascinating is the way not only the school, but the entire community seems to be supporting this, or at least turn their heads. I mean, they apparently have permission to use the parking lot.
Right.
No parents seem to mind, So they're selling concessions, I mean.
I know.
The seniors, we tried. We gave you all a chance, but since you little prick teases can't follow instructions, we're just gonna have to try something else, won't we? Seniors? You love us. Smile. You love us. It's over! Supper, sisters! Supper! Eden, open wide! Open wide! Yes! Love it, girls! Love it! Gorgeous babies!
Welcome to high school, honey.
Propose to Mr. Dawson.
Will you marry me?
Don't know. What's in it for me?
Anything you want?
Anything?
Anything.
Go like this. You spit or swallow?
Whatever you like.
Whatever I like?
I would definitely marry you.
It's so degrading.
You're an asshole.
Yes, I am.
It's terrible, man. It's horrible.
Aha!
I just want you guys to know I feel for you now. I did it when I was a freshman, and you'll do it when you're a senior. But you're doing great. Now fry like bacon, you little freshman piggies! Fry! Fry!
Hi.
Hi. Hello there.
I would like for you to propose to Tony.
Oh, God.
On your knees. Will you marry me?
What am I supposed to say here?
I don't know.
What do you do for me, huh?
Anything you want.
Imagine the possibilities.
Oh, Jesus.
No, seriously, you can stand up. What's your name?
Sabrina.
I'm Tony.
Hi.
Anthony, actually.
Yeah. Sorry.
This is Mike.
Hey.
We were just discussing the utter stupidity of these initiation rituals, and we're kind of wondering why someone like you would subject yourself to the losing end of it all.
What are we having? Social hour over here? You're supposed to be being a bitch. Back to the pit.
All right, kiddo. It's almost over. Don't worry about it.
Okay, so in viewing that clip, it's apparent that these people have volunteered to go through this hazing, and so researchers want to investigate and understand better why people volunteer for this type of humiliation. So researchers argue that U.S. emerging adults actually want one of these well-defined rituals, like the agooby, and even seek to create their own, like hazing. Or if they don't have some type of ritual, this ambiguity of not knowing if they're still kids and teenagers or if they're adults can lead to some rebellion, according to research. And so that rebellion might take the shape of delinquency. And so it's said that in an attempt to try out different identities, emerging adults may rebel against culture and societal norms, and so they engage in some delinquent behaviors. One study found that teens that pay attention to the emotions correlated with their delinquent behavior actually have fewer problems in adulthood. So when we do see delinquent behavior in teens, studies show that if they pay attention to the way they're feeling, the guilt, the shame, then actually they tend to kind of grow out of it, so to speak, and have fewer problems when they're adults. Another way that teens may rebel when they are emerging into adulthood, because we don't have a well-defined cultural transition ritual, is counterculture. We see that teenagers do things like go to Burning Man or Woodstock in the 70s. And this is similar to a tribal ritual. At Woodstock, the hippies and teenagers and emerging adults did drugs, they had sex, they went to live on farms, communes, and that's very similar to Coachella and the things we see today. Also, some young adults might engage in less rebellious types of activities as a means to create their own ritual for transition into adulthood. Some researchers argue that organized sports are one of these ways to initiate young adults into adulthood. And so this is thought of because parents encourage their children to fight through pain, try harder, be brave, don't give up. Similar to what we see the parents of the kids in the Agoobi tribe telling their kids to do. Be brave, be strong, don't give up. So at any rate, it's an interesting question. How would our society benefit from having a more traditional cultural ritual that makes transition into adulthood well defined, so that the teen knows when they're no longer considered a kid by society and they are considered adults? And there's some evidence that maybe these people of this age want that. The peak physical age for human beings is between 18 and 25 years old. This is when we are in prime condition in terms of both our speed and our physical strength. After 25, we experience a loss in energy and strength. So you could consider age 25 to be the height of the peak of our physical ability, and then gradually after that, we just slowly begin to lose energy and strength. Efficiency of most of our bodily functions begins to decline after the age of 25. For example, our cardiac output and our vital capacities start to decrease. There is something called the organ reserve, which is that part of the total capacity of our body's organs that we do not normally need to use. So you could think of this as a gas tank, how the gas tank still has reserve gas when it's on empty. So even if you're on empty, in most cars you could still go like 20 or 30 miles. Our bodily organs have that kind of reserve capacity as well. So the body is actually capable of much more than we usually call on it to do. But as we age, those reserves in our organs start to decrease. So maybe when we're younger, if you use the analogy of the gas tank, we could go 30 miles while we're on empty. And then as we get older, the miles that we could go decreases, 25, 15, 10, 5, as we get older and older. We experience a sharp physical decline later on in adulthood because we didn't really use those reserves that we had much anyways, so we didn't really notice that the reserves were decreasing. But eventually when they get to zero, that is when we start to really become aware of how our body has changed and our physical abilities have really changed. So less illness occurs in early adulthood than in later adulthood, especially as it pertains to disease like cancer, pneumonia. We're more prone to that as we age. However, the good news is that we're less prone to things like cold and flu because when we're younger, we haven't yet built up the antibodies to those type of illnesses, but when we're older, we have, so we don't get cold and flu quite as much. So our lifestyle choices actually can determine whether those diseases like cancer affect us. And so lifestyle choices increase the length of our life over technological advancements in medicine. So what that means is that people often think that the reason why we're living longer is because of all the technology that we have invented in science as it relates to medicinal health. But actually, we know that what really has led people to live longer lives is being educated on good choices in terms of food and fitness. And it is those decisions that help people to live longer, not the treatment that they get at the doctor necessarily. For example, people who reach 45 years old now are only expected to live a couple years longer than people who reached 45 100 years ago. People in Utah that are 45 live an average of 11 years longer than people in Nevada that are 45. And so when researchers look at why, we know that Utah has a high population of Mormons, and they have strict diets in terms of caffeine and drinking alcohol, and smoking cigarettes is pretty much forbidden, whereas in Vegas, obviously, it's Sin City, anything goes, including risky sexual behavior and all of the other detrimental health things that we talked about. So our choice of food also affects the length of our lifespan. Two major health concerns start to arise when we are in this stage of development. One of the things that our choice of foods affects in terms of our health is cholesterol. So cholesterol is a substance in the blood. It includes HDLs and LDLs. We'll talk about the difference between those in a minute. And so the cholesterol adheres to the walls of the blood vessels, restricting the flow of blood. And this can cause strokes and heart attacks. HDL is considered good cholesterol because it protects against the buildup. So there are certain foods that produce less cholesterol that contain HDLs, like fish and poultry, low-fat yogurt and cheese, avoiding trans fats like hydrogenated oils. And so we want to try to limit LDL cholesterol that we get from like In-N-Out cheeseburgers, for example. Cancer is also linked to diet. If we choose foods with high fiber, it can actually help our digestive process. And this can help to eliminate the risk or reduce the risk of things like prostate cancer, abdominal cancer. Some of the foods that you could eat that are high fiber that will help reduce this risk are broccoli, Brussels sprouts, whole grain breads. Another major concern on the effect of lifestyle on our health is the use of alcohol. We know that continued drinking in males can reduce the ability to gain an erection. One of the main problems that we see in early adulthood as it relates to alcohol is actually binge drinking. So binge drinking is considered 5 drinks for males in a row, 4 for females once or twice in a 2-week span. And binge drinking has been associated with fighting, with car accidents, and we also know that depression increases the likelihood of someone binge drinking. It's like they're trying to self-medicate. Small doses of alcohol, however, can produce protein in the blood that lowers cholesterol, specifically from red wine. Another concern is tobacco. We know that there are 400,000 deaths per year. Tobacco is the leading cause of preventable death. We know that the number one reason young adults smoke is peer pressure, followed by concerns about weight and wanting to appear older. Fewer people smoke now than they did 25 years ago, except for one group. And that one group that still smokes just as much as they did 25 years ago is teenage females. Physical fitness is very important to our overall health as well. It helps to eliminate heart disease, improve your immune system, relieve stress. And we know that even just 1 hour of exercise at least every other day has been proven to have all kinds of health and social benefits, like increasing productivity at work, reducing obesity, relieving and preventing migraine headache attacks, and reducing joint pain. However, with all of these benefits, less than 15% of adult Americans work out at least 3 times per week. So one of the best types of workouts is walking, actually. It reduces the risk of osteoporosis, stroke, diabetes, and even some cancers. It's considered to be one of the best forms of exercise because it puts the least amount of pressure on your joints, and so it helps your bones to stay strong over time. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is go ahead and pause the video and head on over to Moodle to complete lecture activity number 1. Let's take a look at cognitive development in early adulthood, particularly our intellectual development and how it relates to our ethical development. Similar to morals and what we consider to be right versus wrong behavior and how that affects our judgment and understanding of the world. So we're going to approach this by looking at one of the leading theories of cognitive development in this age group. And so this theory is called Perry's theory of ethical development. And he says there are 9 positions in 3 broad categories that early adults go through while they're developing their intellect and ethics. And so to come up with this theory, he studied several hundred males between the ages of 17 and 22 at Harvard. So one of the first 3 broad categories that Perry identified was dualism. And he says in this phase, people think that things are either absolutely right or absolutely wrong. Sometimes this is referred to as absolutism. Perry believed that all of us start out in this stage, primarily while we are under the care of our parents. In this stage, we think in terms of right, wrong, black, and white. All problems have just one true answer. And this way of thinking serves us well as we're growing up and learning about the world. All strangers are bad, avoid strangers. Lying is wrong. But then, as we grow up, we start to understand that maybe things aren't as black and white and that some issues in life exist in a gray area. However, almost all new college students are in this stage, and most people in general never actually leave. So dualism is usually associated with conservative thinking, or sometimes it's referred to as being associated with Republican thinking. People on the right tend to think in terms of right and wrong, good and evil. Duality is also a strong theme in religion and rock-solid conservative values. For example, thou shalt not kill. The fallacy of dualism is not realizing that one person's set of values might not work for everyone, that we all have different values, different ethics, different morals, and different doesn't necessarily mean deficient. So there are three positions that fall under this category of dualism. The first position is position 1, where right answers are absolutely right, no exceptions. We get right answers from our authorities, like our parents, our professors, our pastors. And then as we age and develop and mature, we move into position 2, and this is where a person recognizes that actually uncertainty does exist, but ascribes it to poorly qualified authorities. So when someone can't give you a definitive answer, it's thought of being that they don't know the definitive answer, and that's why. And then position 3, when a person moves into this position, for them, they think that diversity and uncertainty do exist because the authority doesn't know the answer yet. That maybe there is a potential answer, but there needs to be more research done on it in order to get that answer in terms of what's morally right or wrong. Relativism is the second broad category in Perry's theory, and this is an attitude or philosophy that says anything can be right or wrong depending on the situation. Therefore, all views are equally right. So thinking relativistically is the opposite of thinking dualistically. Instead of black and white, people in this stage see many shades of gray. It can be very exciting intellectually to realize that there are many right answers to a problem potentially, and that there's not always a clear difference between right and wrong, like we were taught when we were younger. For example, thou shalt not murder or thou shalt not kill unless they're a soldier, unless someone breaks into your house, that there are exceptions to rules. A person in this stage believes that everything is relative to a person's viewpoint. And so since there's no fixed viewpoint of reference, then in a way there really can't be any set rules. People on the left tend to think more relativistically, seeing right and wrong as relative, a matter of opinion. They are not bound by the strict moral code of conservatism and dualism. They tend to be more open-minded to alternative ways of looking at the world, seeing that in different cultures, different standards for what's morally correct, what's right and wrong, for Americans might not be true for everyone. The fallacy of relativism is not having a solid foundation of principles. A person who loses all sense of right and wrong and believes everyone's entitled to their own ethical opinion is vulnerable to a life of questionable behavior and irresponsibility. Because rules do need to exist. We just need to be smart enough to know when there should be acceptable exceptions to rules and when there shouldn't be. And so the three stages that a person goes through during relativism is position 4, recognizing that two authority figures can have differing opinions without being wrong, and sometimes authority figures want you to make your own opinion. So maybe not giving you the answers on things. This is something you really experience in college. I know I often ask my students, what do you think? Because some questions don't matter what I think. It's more about you figuring out what's right or wrong for you. In position 5, a person's knowledge and values are relative to their context. So this is something that a person in this position starts to understand, that the culture they live in really creates our viewpoint on ethics and morals. And then position 6 is when we realize that we must make a commitment to our own ideas rather than just mindlessly or blindly following an authority figure. Okay, so for a more in-depth discussion on this idea of morality and subjectivity and objective morality, what's right and wrong, and who gets to decide that, we're going to listen to one of the leading psychologists on the study of morality, Sam Harris.
Now, to speak about the conditions of well-being in this life for human beings, we know that there's a continuum of such facts. We know that it's possible to live in a failed state, where everything that can go wrong does go wrong, where mothers cannot feed their children, where strangers cannot find the basis for peaceful collaboration, where people are murdered indiscriminately. And we know that it's possible to move along this continuum towards something quite a bit more idyllic, I mean, to a place where a conference like this is even conceivable. And we know that there are right and wrong answers to how to move in this space. There are truths to be known about how human communities flourish, whether or not we understand these truths, and morality relates to these truths. So in talking about values, we are talking about facts. Now, many of you might worry that the notion of well-being is truly undefined and seemingly perpetually open to be reconstrued. And so then how, therefore, can there be an objective notion of well-being? Well, consider by analogy the concept of physical health. I mean, the concept of physical health is undefined, as we just heard from Michael Spector. It has changed over the years. When this statue was carved, the average life expectancy was probably 30. Okay, it's now around 80 in the developed world. There may come a time when we meddle with our genomes in such a way that not being able to run a marathon at age 200 will be considered a profound disability. You know, people will send you donations when you're in that condition. Notice that the fact that the concept of health is open, genuinely open for revision, does not make it vacuous. Okay, the distinction between a healthy person and a dead one is about as clear and consequential as any we make in science. Now, another thing to notice is there may be many peaks on the moral landscape. There may be equivalent ways to thrive. Okay, there may be equivalent ways to organize a human society so as to maximize human flourishing. Now, why wouldn't this undermine an objective morality? Well, think of how we talk about food. I would never be tempted to argue to you that there must be one right food to eat. There's clearly a range of materials that constitute healthy food. But there's nevertheless a clear distinction between food and poison. Okay, the fact that there are many right answers to the question, what is food, does not tempt us to say that there are no truths to be known about human nutrition. Now, many people worry that a universal morality would require moral precepts that admit of no exceptions. So, for instance, if it's really wrong to lie, it must always be wrong to lie. And if you can find an exception, well, then there's no such thing as moral truth. Now, why would we think this? Consider, by analogy, the game of chess. Now, if you're going to play good chess, a principle like don't lose your queen is very good to follow. Okay, but it clearly admits of exceptions. I mean, there are moments where losing your queen is a brilliant thing to do. There are moments where it's the only good thing you can do. And yet, chess is a domain of perfect objectivity. The fact that there are exceptions here does not change that at all. Now, this brings us to the sorts of moves that people are apt to make in the moral sphere. Okay? Consider the great problem of women's bodies. What to do about them? Well, this is one thing you can do about them. You can cover them up. Now, it is the position, generally speaking, of our intellectual community that, while we might not like this, we might think of this as wrong in Boston or Palo Alto. Who are we to say that the proud denizens of an ancient culture are wrong to force their wives and daughters to live in cloth bags? I mean, who are we to say even that they're wrong to beat them with lengths of steel cable or throw battery acid in their faces if they decline the privilege of being smothered in this way? Okay, well, who are we not to say this? Who are we to pretend that we know so little about human well-being that we have to be non-judgmental about a practice like this? I'm not talking about voluntary wearing of a veil. I mean, women should be able to wear whatever they want as far as I'm concerned. But what does voluntary mean in a community where when a girl gets raped, her father's first impulse, rather often, is to murder her out of shame? Just let that fact detonate in your brain for a minute. Your daughter gets raped, and what you want to do is kill her. What are the chances that represents a peak of human flourishing? Now, to say this is not to say that we have got the perfect solution in our own society. I mean, for instance, this is what it's like to go to a newsstand almost anywhere in the civilized world. Now, granted, for many men, it may require a degree in philosophy to see something wrong with these images. But if we are in a reflective mood, we can ask, is this the perfect expression of psychological balance with respect to variables like youth and beauty and women's bodies? I mean, is this the optimal environment in which to raise our children? Probably not. Okay, so perhaps there's some place on the spectrum between these two extremes that represents a place of better balance. Okay? But perhaps there are many such places. I mean, again, given other changes in human culture, there may be many peaks on the moral landscape. But the thing to notice is that there'll be many more ways not to be on a peak. We do something different when talking about morality, especially secular, academic, scientist types. When talking about morality, we value differences of opinion in a way that we don't in any other area of our lives. Now notice that we don't do this in science. On the left you have Edward Witten. He's a string theorist. If you ask the smartest physicists around, who's the smartest physicist around, in my experience, half of them will say Ed Witten. The other half will tell you they don't like the question. So, what would happen if I showed up at a physics conference and said string theory is bogus? You know, it doesn't resonate with me, it's not how I choose to view the universe at the smallest scale, I'm not a fan. Okay? Well, nothing would happen because I'm not a physicist. I don't understand string theory. I'm the Ted Bundy of string theory. Okay? I wouldn't want to belong to any string theory club that would have me as a member. Okay? But this is just the point. Okay? Whenever we are talking about facts, certain opinions must be excluded. That is what it is to have a domain of expertise. That is what it is for knowledge to count. How have we convinced ourselves that in the moral sphere there is no such thing as moral expertise, or moral talent, or moral genius even? How have we convinced ourselves that every opinion has to count? How have we convinced ourselves that every culture has a point of view on these subjects worth considering? Does the Taliban have a point of view on physics that is worth considering? No. Okay. How is their ignorance any less obvious on the subject of human well-being? So this, I think, is what the world needs now. It needs people like ourselves to admit that there are right and wrong answers to questions of human flourishing. And morality relates to that domain of facts.
The third broad category in Perry's theory of ethical development is the category in which the individual realizes that certainty is impossible, that you can't be certain necessarily on what's right versus wrong all the time, but that commitment to a certain position is necessary, even if you don't have certainty. And so this stage is called commitment. Even though few people in this world ever reach this final stage, it represents true critical thinking, being able to figure out on your own, situation by situation, what is morally correct. In this stage, you are acutely aware of both the dualistic and relativistic natures of the universe, but you commit to a set of principles based on careful consideration of all available information. So on the spectrum between black and white and gray, this stage doesn't fall in the middle. It kind of rises above it, as you can see portrayed on the picture on the slide there. In terms of politics, a person at this level could be on the left or the right, as long as he or she has committed to a set of principles after evaluating each side. So they listen to the Republicans, they listen to the Democrats, and then they determine what they agree with, not based on what political party they belong to, but based on what they think is the most ethically and intellectually sound. So there are three positions in the commitment category. Position 7 is when a person chooses commitments in specific areas like politics, sex, drugs, religion, what they believe to be right or wrong relating to those issues. They kind of commit to ideas on that. And then they move into position 8, which is testing those commitments to see their implications. So let's say they decide that they are going to be Christian and they're going to commit to that viewpoint. They might test out what it's like to be a Christian and see how does it affect my life, going to church all the time, or going to church on Sundays, volunteering, living a life as Jesus or a Christian would. And then position 9 is identity is confirmed through the commitment. So after they've kind of tested what works for them, maybe they decide Christianity doesn't work for them, or they decide it does, then they have really kind of cemented in these commitments and their values and their ideas and their ethical beliefs, their moral beliefs, and now their identity is confirmed. Okay, we're going to watch a short clip that summarizes Perry's entire theory.
Hello, my name is William Rafiki Perry, and I would like to tell you the story of a young lion's journey through the intellectual and ethical development. The story starts out with the birth of a young cub and heir to the Pride Land Kingdom. His name, Simba. Position 1. As young Simba grows, he learns to understand the rules of his father. Son, do not travel beyond the borders of the Pride Land.
Yes, I understand, Father.
Position 2. When Simba, Nala, and Zazu are out practicing pouncing in the fields, Simba and Nala choose not to listen to the authority of Zazu. They leave the fields to explore the elephant graveyards.
Let's leave Zazu behind so that we can explore the elephant graveyards. Yeah, we don't really need to listen to him.
Position 3. At the graveyard, Simba realizes that although Scar is his uncle, he should not trust him. Not all authorities should be blindly followed.
Sorry, Dad. We should not have disobeyed your authority and traveled outside the land's borders. I now understand why you would have such rules, to protect us from things we do not yet understand.
Position 4. After Mufasa's death, Simba runs away from the Pride Land and is found by Timon and Pumbaa. After saving Simba from certain death in the desert, the three return to the jungle where Timon and Pumbaa teach him their way of life. Hakuna Matata. Ain't no worries, problem-free philosophy. There, everyone has their own way of life. No one is better than the other.
These are my favorite types of bugs. Find the ones that are right for you. Come on, kid, try it out. Hakuna Matata.
Hakuna Matata, what a wonderful phrase. Hakuna Matata, ain't no passing craze.
It means no worries for the rest of your days.
Yeah, say it, kid. It's our problem-free philosophy. Hakuna Matata.
Position 5. Eventually, Nala comes to find Simba in the woods. He realizes that she has a very different perspective on what he needs to do.
Simba, you must come back. We need a leader, and Scar is destroying the Pride Land. I cannot return, Nala. I'm responsible for my father's death.
Position 6. After a spiritual experience with his father in the sky, Simba realizes he ultimately is going to have to make a commitment to either stay forever in the jungle with Timon and Pumbaa or return to the Pride Land. However, he has not yet made up his mind. Position 7. Simba makes the commitment to return to the Pride Land and take back power from his uncle. Position 8. Once returning to the Pride Land and seeing it under distress, he confronts his uncle Scar in a fight to the death. Don't let me go.
I don't want to, but I must do this to save our land.
Position 9. After killing his uncle Scar, Simba returns to his rightful place as king of Prideland. He makes more commitments to his land, continuing the circle of life.
It means no worries for the rest of your day.
Okay, so that's Perry's theory. However, he does say that moving through these stages can be interrupted or cause a person to defect in one of three ways. And the first way that moving through the stages can be interrupted is called temporizing. So some people remain in one position for a year or more, exploring its implications, but hesitating to make any further progress, to move on to the next theory. And this is called temporizing. For example, staying in level 1 of Mario Brothers and refusing to try any other levels. The second way that the progress through the positions can be interrupted is escape. Escape is when others refuse responsibility for making any commitments because everyone's opinion is equally right. So this person believes that no commitments can be made because they're kind of still in this relativistic thinking and believing that everyone has a right to their own moral opinions, and since everyone has a right, you can't make a commitment to what's right or wrong. And so this person attempts to escape this dilemma of having to choose a side of right versus wrong on, say, things like abortion or gay marriage by revisiting position 4 and 5. So to remind us, position 4 and 5, position 4 was recognizing that two authority figures can have differing opinions without being wrong, and sometimes authority figures want you to make an opinion. And position 5 was understanding that a person's knowledge and values are relative to their context, what neighborhood they grew up, what culture they grew up, what their parents were like. And so when someone escapes, they usually escape back to position 4 and 5, and they kind of stay there. So this is like not being able to choose between Pepsi and Coke and never making the decision. And then the last way that the progress gets interrupted is what Perry called retreat. And this is when someone goes back to an earlier ethical position. So maybe they progress onto position 7 or something, and they get confused by the confrontation and uncertainty that people go through. And so they go back to more familiar positions. They kind of become freaked out at the idea that we all have different moral perspectives, or that they have to make a commitment even though they're uncertain or something along those lines. And so they just go back to an earlier position. So it's like getting to position 9 and then hitting Control Alt Delete. Okay, go ahead and pause the video here. Head over to Moodle and complete lecture activity number 2. And once you've finished that, come back to this point in the lecture. So since Perry studied men, if you remember, at Harvard, he studied males only between the ages of 17 and 22. A woman by the name of Mary Belenke, pictured here on the slide, with some colleagues, wrote a book called Women's Ways of Knowing. And so she collected her own data to come up with the categories of how women begin to know. Because she was interested in seeing if cognitive development in early adult women differed like it did with men, or if it differed between women and men. However, rather than a progression of stages like Perry found, Belenke found that women were in one of 5 perspectives generally. Some women progress through all 5 perspectives in order. Some don't. Some skip perspectives. Some just experience 1 perspective. Some experience 2 or 3. So it really depends on the woman and her experiences and her culture and how she was raised and all of that. So the first perspective is called silence. And this is her first phase, although, again, not all women enter it, of women's thinking. And it's characterized by concepts of right and wrong. She said that women feel passive and dependent when they are in this stage, and often refer to themselves kind of internally as deaf and dumb. Think that they should know rules, ethical rules, moral rules, intellectual rules, that don't exist. And women in this phase often come from families with violence, abuse, and chaos. So it makes sense that they often think that they're deaf and dumb and don't understand the world, don't understand specific rules, because they have been victims of abuse or probably told that they were dumb or stupid or didn't understand for a significant portion of their life. And then this leads us to the second phase, which is known as received knowledge. And so women in this phase are characterized by being awed by the authorities, but far less affiliated with them than in the first stage. So they learn by listening to the authority. They hate ambiguity. They hate that gray area. They want to know what's right and wrong, and they want an authority to tell them. They believe in those absolute truths, the dualism that Perry mentioned. And they kind of think that men identify with authorities, that men can easily relate and be on the same level with professors and doctors and parents and police officers, whereas they don't see themselves as being on that same level. The third phase is called subjective knowledge, and this is characterized by some crisis of a male authority. Maybe they had a bad experience with a man that caused them to distrust men, for example, especially men in authority positions. Their father could constitute an authority position, a doctor, a police officer, anyone that they felt had some type of power over them. And so this crisis sparks a distrust of outside sources' knowledge, outside sources, people outside of themselves, and some experience that confirmed a trust in women thinkers themselves. So they kind of distrust male authority figures because they had some bad experience, and they start to understand that women can also be authority figures, and they start to trust in the beliefs of other women and even in the beliefs of themselves, kind of like trusting their gut going forward, trusting that women's intuition. And so the next phase is called procedural knowledge, and this is characterized by a distrust of both knowledge from authority and the female thinker's own inner authority or gut, distrusting their own women's intuition. So they distrust authority, they distrust their gut, they're interested in how something is said versus what is said. They're interested in tone of voice. They're interested in facial expressions. They're interested in what they see externally rather than kind of using critical thinking and looking at the substance of what someone is saying and the validity of it. So there's two separate types of knowing. There's analytical and connected knowing. And so analytical knowing is when a person tries to be objective in evaluating something someone says to them, like a scientist, and they try to separate their own perspectives and biases from what they're hearing. And then there's connected knowing, which is understanding through empathizing with others, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding their perspective because you can relate to them, because you see the world from their viewpoint. And so we see that people in procedural knowledge do both of these, analytical and connected, but more with an emphasis on the connecting, really trying to focus on how something is said, because they're kind of skeptical of the message that people are giving because they think there might be some underlying manipulative intent. Okay, and then the last stage is constructed knowledge. And this is characterized by an integration of subjective and procedural ways of knowing. So kind of a combination of the third and fourth phase. Women in this stage have a high tolerance for ambiguity. They understand things exist in a gray area. They're willing to accept that internal conflict that comes with not being certain. And so they engage in this constant balancing act of ideas, understanding both sides of an argument, for example. So what issues do people in early adulthood often experience related to work and work life? We know that one of the things we're seeing now more than ever, kind of the standard, is becoming a dual career family. This is a family in which both the mother and father are working. However, Despite women working, they are still expected to maintain the family, housework, childcare, things of that nature. So this expectation of them to continue working and maintaining the family after work is called the second shift. Women often work shorter hours and change careers more than men. However, we do know that men are starting to stay home with the kids more than ever. One of the ways that people stay home to work, both mothers and fathers, is home-based work. And so we're seeing an increase in this because technology has allowed for more people to work at home. It also allows some parents to forego paying for childcare. However, research shows that home-based work increases the likelihood of being a workaholic. Okay, let's watch a quick video on the second shift that gives more explanation of what exactly it is.
As a busy mom, every day is chock full of things to do. You have to do this, and that, and then this, and that, plus this too.
I think one of the greatest challenges we working women have is the second shift, and how I can be a great mom, the best mom I can be, how I can be a great wife, and be successful in my career.
It's been a long time since we've held the view that a woman's place is in the home. Yet the latest statistics clearly show it's still women who do the lion's share of the housework. Linda Kincaid reports on studies showing women are suffering mentally and physically as a result.
Just today, I swear I'm not doing anything, nothing at all.
I do the cooking, the cleaning, the washing, all the housework.
Later.
No, now. You've been playing all day.
I probably do about 10 to 15% of housework.
Would it
Just-
kill you
just
to
let me
help?
just let me just finish, please. I should help with more around the house.
I would rather have my butt rubbed with a brick than do housework.
I'm gonna kick my feet up, then stare at the fan, turn the TV on, throw my head.
When it comes to housework, most men are right at home, away from the dirty dishes, on the couch, in front of a television, or behind a computer.
Troy, what do you do around the house?
Not a lot. When it comes to housework, yeah, I am lazy.
Looks like washing day.
More than 4 decades after being granted the right to equal pay in the workforce, many women are still not receiving it, and on top of that, are bearing the brunt of the 3 C's: cleaning, cooking and childcare.
It's certainly the case that we've probably made greater advances in equality in the workplace than we have in the home.
I said, you have to understand that nothing's going to change for you. You go to work and you come home and everything's done, but my workload doubles.
According to a Swedish study, women become emotionally distressed if they feel they're doing most of the housework and are not being treated as an equal by their partner. This can result in psychological distress that could include restlessness, nervousness, anxiety, and reduced marital satisfaction.
We used data from the nationally representative 2003 to 2007 American time use data, and we showed that working moms were about twice as likely, or more than twice as likely, to get up for the night shift of caregiving for dependent children in the household than working fathers were.
Until the US addresses, as a country, not just leaves it to corporations, but until our country addresses the fact that 70% of working women are working mothers, or until we actually celebrate and encourage more men to play a larger role in parenting, which countries like Norway do, I think women aren't going to make any progress.
Okay, that concludes chapter 13. Head on over to Moodle and complete the journal assignment as well as the forum assignment, and then we will see you for the next lecture.